right, my buddy Greg Renoff just told me that Van Halen played on these City Hall steps for Pasadena's Centennial. Let's go over here and stand where Van Halen played, all right? I remember one of my guests telling me he heard him playing Captain Beyond out here. And he was like, whoa, what is that? And it was Van Halen right here at City Hall. It's amazing. Check it out. Huge City Hall. Pretty cool. All right, y'all, I'm back at the Van Halen stage. Last time I was here, it wasn't permanent yet, so this is the permanent final version of that. Pretty cool. So right down the street from the Van Halen stage is the former sound chamber location. It's on El Molino if you want to find it. And it's next to the Pasadena Playhouse. That's the two spaces that were next to the Pasadena Playhouse that I vlogged last year. But I'm going to show it to you again in case you're just getting into this. And you can find it if you're here in town. It's literally 2 or 3 blocks or maybe less from the Van Halen stage, where Eddie bought the Destroyer that became the Shark, and Chris Holmes also bought his Destroyer. In fact, I think Chris Holmes bought his first, and then Eddie went down and bought his second. That or was swapped around, but they're both from like the first batch of, you know, these copies of the Explorer that came over from Japan, and were said to be Krina or Limba, but they weren't. They're actually ash, Japanese ash, sin ash, to be exact. Here they are. There's 3 units. 2 of those, first 2 were the sound chamber back in the day. That's where it was. There it is, the Pasadena Civic Auditorium where the Eddie Van Halen plaque is. I'm going to show you that too. You always have to come to this spot when you're in Pasadena when you're a Van Halen fan. Behind me is the Civic exhibition hall. This is where they're having a comic convention today. And I thought I'd check it out, see if I can see inside, see if it's the pit, like Eddie said. It had a walkway down into a floor that Eddie called it the pit. And that's where all the bands would set up. And there'd be multiple bands playing. So it's a little bit of a mystery to whether this is still the same spot or not. But my locals tell me it is, and it's the same room and everything. So when we walk in, we'll be able to tell if it's the pit. Wow, I'm here in the Pasadena Civic exhibition hall. You see behind me. And it's kind of a crazy story about how this place has been transformed over the years, but this does look very similar to the lighting that was in the original photos that you saw with Van Halen. I'm not sure this is the exact room. Some people say it is, some people say it isn't. So if you know, let me know. But I came in here to Comic-Con to check this room out. And I met Vinny Appice while I was here. And I got a drum head from Vinny Appice, and I got a photo that I'll show you. Met a lot of people that like Van Halen, that had some history with Van Halen in here. And some pretty cool experiences just by walking in the door. So I'm going to keep walking around, and who knows what's going to happen next. All right, so that was my trip to the Pasadena Civic Exhibition Hall. Incredible. I met a bunch of people on the floor that were big Van Halen fans, and we talked a lot of Van Halen, and it's a big place for Van Halen back in the day. Even if it's not exactly the same room anymore, it's an amazing spot and where it all happened with all these kids that loved Van Halen locally. Ted Templeman finally signed Van Halen and saw how great they were. Take a look. I always go by the childhood home. I always do that. right, I'm back at 1881 Los Lunas again. This is probably, I don't know, I've been coming here for over 10 or 15 years to see the house. They were here from the mid-60s to 86, I believe it was. So they're here almost around 20 years here at the house. And of course, you know, Ed wrote everything and developed here at the house. This is where it all happened. And of course, wrote a lot of the great songs we know about. Most all the great songs on the first album, and probably the first few albums were written here at the house. And on his bandmaster, his white bandmaster, as he said in the Guitar Aficionado article. He painted his guitars out back, and we'll take a look at that in a second. I've always been told, at least by Greg Grinoff, my buddy, that it was reported to him that it was on the clotheslines out back, and maybe even while his mother had clothes on there drying. There's stories of Ed playing with his brother in the front living room with his mom asleep in the other room while they're practicing here in the front of this house. There's all kinds of crazy stories. There's a crazy story about a tree out back that's really unique that I've never seen. Of course, I hadn't been in the backyard, so I haven't been able to check that out. A few of my guests have been here and been in the house. Carl Jaw had been here to pick up the Marshall, the famous Grail Marshall. Yesterday, I met the daughter of Truman Fisher, who was their music teacher at Pasadena City College. And she told me she was here in 1984 when they were at their biggest point with the family. Her dad was close with Mr. Van Halen, so he would come here and spend time with them. So it's pretty cool. A lot of the folks that I've gotten to know have had time in this house. I've had people that I know tour this house at different points inside, and one of them told me there was actually black and red paint back there on a heater duct, you know, like a floor heater that comes up, you know, like those old school heaters under the house. So that's pretty cool. Pretty cool stuff. 1881 Los Lunas. Can't believe it's not really a landmark yet, but it will be one day, I'm sure. It's looking good over here. The yard looks well kept. Things are looking good. That's it. Childhood home of Eddie Van Halen. Garage is here, and there is some black and red overspray in there, which is pretty cool. I saw a picture years ago where somebody had gotten in. I don't know whether they got a tour or what at the time, but and of course over behind me, up in the corner, you see that little addition off to the side of the house. That little sun porch, I think they used as Eddie's other bedroom, or the second bedroom for the boys. I'm not 100% sure, but that's what I've heard over the years. And of course, the backyard was where she would have her clothes line up, and he would paint the guitars back here in the backyard. It's pretty cool to think about, right? History being done right here in the backyard at this little house in Pasadena. I always vlog this spot because, you know, it's the most historic spot of Van Halen ever. His dad, you know, there was this story about his father coming back here after a gig, I think maybe, or just coming back here late, and there was a trailer blocking I guess the gate, and he tried to move it, and the trailer fell and cut his finger off, or cut part of his finger off, and that's why he couldn't play very well. But he did play on Diver Down, as we all know, on Big Bad Bill, and but that all happened right here in the backyard. And you know, Eddie loved his dad, and to have that happen to him as it being a musician was like the worst case scenario almost. You know, they might have practiced in this garage, and he might have painted in that garage, but obviously there's some overspray in there, so maybe so. Maybe I should make a call, huh? Y'all want to see the inside of this thing? I do. All right, there it is. The alley.